Stan up in Little Rock said, hey, with Nick Saban retired, will Alabama versus Georgia still be the biggest matchup in the SEC? Yeah, I think for the time being it is. However, there's no way it's the same. I mean, I think I'm right about that. There's no way it feels the same. You can't possibly get that Saban-Kirby thing without Nick Saban. Now, Alabama could still be really good. Georgia could still be good. Maybe they're the best program in the conference. But to me, what made Bama, Georgia great and like really, really thick with hostility was the Saban-Kirby dynamic. And I grew up right on the Chattahoochee River. I grew up on the border of these two. And I was down there when Saban got hired, and of course, like everyone else, watched Alabama with Kirby Smart as the defensive coordinator. And then about the time Kirby goes to Georgia, I'm coming up in like local radio and local TV down in Columbus, and it was awesome. It was awesome, but I was on the front lines of seeing both fan bases and how they interpreted, their respective roles, but also like I was watching this evolution in the way they viewed each other. Georgia, Alabama was always kind of a Cold War down there. They're not traditional rivals. They barely ever played, but yet the hostility, because they share a border with each other, was really thick. And there was always this feeling amongst Georgia folks before Saban came to Alabama that your yesterday's news, like, yeah, your trophy case looked impressive, but in the here and now and moving forward, we got Mark Richt and we're better than you. But then Nick Saban comes along, and then Alabama kind of reestablishes itself as the dominant program once they take down Florida. And then Georgia folks always felt to themselves that they were capable of matching what Bama did. They just needed their version of Nick Saban. But then everyone understood there is no other Nick Saban. Or is there? Because there's this dude over there named Kirby Smart who was one of ours. We just need to bring him home. And then he comes home. Kirby wasn't some Akron or Kent State or Eastern Michigan grad, all due respect to the MAC. He was a Georgia guy. And when he comes home, it's Georgia with one of their guys that came from the dark side that's going to help us establish ourselves as the top program in America. So, it's so thick with hostility. The staffs hated each other. The recruiting staffs hated each other. Half of them worked for one and then went to work for the other and vice versa. So they recruited against each other. And what happened was really funny because nationally, you would look and you would think, oh, Alabama's chief rival is Auburn. Bama was never recruiting against Auburn. It was Georgia, Bama, Georgia. Like those were the two that were competing for the best recruits in the country and in the South. So I think there's a lot to be said for the competitive nature. They were two of the best rosters in America. They were two of the best teams, two of the best coaching staffs in America. But the hostility, like how personal it was, you could have cut it with one of those butter knives from McDonald's, the plastic version. That's where the intensity came from. And here's the other thing that happened. When Kirby came to Georgia, he told them everything that they didn't want to admit before that. Georgia folks, some of them, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but like Georgia folks and people at Georgia thought they were doing things at the highest level possible, but they weren't. Kirby was at a place where they were doing it at the highest level possible. And when Kirby came to Georgia, he let them know, I can give you those results, but I can't give it to you unless you do things at the highest level possible. Don't worry, I know how to do it, but you just got to let go and let me handle it. And they did. First time Georgia's ever done that as a program. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly but fairly surely, they relinquished this adherence to, the more sweater vest mentality, and they went full polo mentality. And I don't mean the sport, I mean just a different way of doing things. And now it's yielded results, but it was an amazing time. Saban versus Kirby kind of had the longevity that people thought Saban versus Urban Meyer was going to. And Urban Meyer was out of the conference a couple of years after Nick Saban came in. So then you beg the question, okay, well, with Saban gone, what does Kalen DeBoer's Alabama look like? Well, I don't think they're going to take a back seat to anyone. I don't think Alabama's going anywhere. They'll still be really good. In fact, you could find that they squeeze a little bit more game to game, roster to roster, recruiting class to recruiting class from an evaluation and development standpoint than even you expected them to. Because that's what he's always done. It's what DeBoer's teams have always done. Bama's not going anywhere. I just think there's not a natural tie, obviously. I don't know that Have Kirby and Kalen DeBoer really crossed paths? I don't think they have. I could be wrong on that. So it's just going to be those logos. It's going to be those brands. They'll always matter. I think they play this year. They play in week 4, and Georgia's about a 3.5 point favorite in that game in Tuscaloosa right now. Now, if you want it to very quickly take on a personal feel, have Georgia go there and lose as a favorite with Carson Beck returning and with Alabama, seemingly hitting the reset button. That's not really what's happening at all. They got a lot of really good players over there still. But this will be the first time in a very long time that a team will be sort of low-key expected to go to Alabama and win. Texas went there. They weren't expected to win. LSU in 2019, they weren't expected to win. Folks thought they had a good shot. This Georgia team will be expected to go to Alabama and win. Well, if they don't, and they got their returning quarterback coming in, Carson Beck, and they go over there and they drop a game, they're not out of it because you got to lose like 3 games, 4 games to be out of the playoff now. But if all of a sudden Kirby goes 1-4 versus Saban and then gets started 0-1 versus Kalen DeBoer, you won't have to worry about anything else. He'll hear it from his own folks because they've set an insanely high standard there. He set an insanely high standard there. So that's the way I think very quickly it would maintain its status as one of the premier rivalries in the sport. Other than that, I don't really know that you can maintain that, man. That's why they're so special, because what it takes for a rivalry to be that intense is pretty fleeting. It's no different than a storm maintaining maximum strength. Those ingredients have to come together perfectly. I'm just glad we got to see it as long as we did. I'm not writing the eulogy or anything like that. I'm just saying the matchup takes on a little different form now.